Hey, everybody, it's Paula.
And John.
And school is
out for summer.
Oh, wow. Are you singing right now?
I was singing a lot. Do you know what classic rocker sang that song?
I don't. Ozzy Osbourne? I have no idea.
Close. Alice Cooper. It's a classic rock song. You hear it almost every summer, and it kind of it's a good vibe. It's a summer vibe.
Okay, speaking of summer vibes, this month in July, John and I are doing a series, School's Out for Parents, in fact, and we are going to recap some of our favorite moments from our favorite episodes. And you just teed it up so beautifully, John, saying rocker, because we are talking to none other than rocker Rob Thomas from MatchBox 20. This was the very first episode of the show, and they've been around for so long. I feel like they were kind of like the songs of our college years.
Oh, 100%.
90s.
Matchbox 20, love some of those songs. What a Mad Season. That was such a great album. And they've still been rocking for the last 25 plus years.
I Want to Push You Around.
Yes. And
that's the song. Okay, so the reason we wanted to bring this episode back, and again, we're just bringing you some of our favorite moments from the episode. And again, this was the very first episode. Rob talks about his son, and a lot of people had no idea he even had a child. So he talks about being a parent, but he tells us his best life advice, but his worst parenting advice, which is great.
And his son is now a musician playing with him, correct?
He is. He's on tour, and Matchbox 20 is on tour. But you'll also hear how the name Matchbox 20 came to be. It's such a great, unusual name, and Rob's going to explain it to us.
Very memorable.
Just like this episode. So here's Rob Thomas in one of our favorite moments.
We had a record deal before we had a name.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got signed originally, and the band Tab the Secret had broken up. So they signed me, but I wasn't comfortable kind of taking all that on my own. So I brought Paul and Brian as well to sign. So the three of us signed this record deal. We were still looking for guitar players, and we needed a name. And we went through 4,000 of them. I mean, over and over and over, just list after list after list. And one day Paul was a waiter at this place that we used to play at. And the story he tells was that he saw a guy with a jersey that had 20 on it and like a bunch of patches. And one patch was Matchbox. And he was like, Matchbox 20. He kind of liked it. And I looked over to like some drunken frat boys at the time. And I was like, well, let me ask you guys a question. Would you go see a band called Matchbox 20? And they went, Matchbox 20! And I thought it sounded so cool when they yelled it. I didn't want to hear it, And at the time, like, you'll understand this, like we were, being big MTV heads.
Oh, yeah.
It had to pass the Kurt Loder test, which meant, like, could we imagine Kurt Loder coming on with MTV News and being like, Matchbox 20 released a new album today. And we're like, yeah, it feels good. I like it.
It does. I always wondered, like, the origin of it. What was and it's somebody's t-shirt, just how random
it is.
It's
really funny. I mean, there was no deep meaning behind it. And I think, now we're kind of with it, just like I'm Rob.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works now. And now we're Matchbox 20. That's just who we are, whether we like it or not.
It's worked. It's worked for a very long time, like you said, going on 30 years. So, Rob, when you look back at it, like, what was your big break in music to get to where you are? Or were there a multitude of them? What was your... I
mean, there was a couple things. Like, we came up in what we call the last good time, right? Which it was kind of the last group of musicians who still came about their success in a way that kind of started back in the 50s, right? You got a band together, you made some songs, a guy from a label would come check you out, and if he liked you, you'd make a record, and that song, you get songs on the radio, and if you get enough songs on the radio, people come see you. It was like...
You played in your mother's garage. I mean, that...
Yeah, very old, like everything about it was a very, like the last kind of group of old school before everything kind of changed, exponentially faster year after year. So we were lucky enough, that there was a guy named Kim Stevens who was from Atlantic Records who once came to like a local music festival to see another band called Spider Monkey and caught us while we were there. And don't laugh. Spider Monkey was the big band. And,
just the name.
And he was like, you guys don't have it yet, but he kept coming back every few months. Whenever we'd have a show, he would just appear sometimes and keep checking us out until he kind of felt like we were getting somewhere. And then when we broke up, that he was the guy that said, listen, I think you've got good songs. I think I can trust your songwriting. Right at that time, this guy named Matt Serletic, who had just produced these 2 Collective Soul records that had done really well at the time on Atlantic Records, came through and found us. And we wound up signing a production deal through him to Atlantic. We made this record. Then the day that our record came out, our record label folded. We were on Lava Records. It was an imprint on Atlantic, and everybody pretty much except for like 4 bands on Lava got axed. And then the 4 of us folded into Atlantic, but we were kind of on the cutting block at that time because, we didn't have any proven success. Our record came out that day. That first week, we sold a whopping 612 copies of the record. And at the time, we thought that was great. Like, we hadn't sold 600 copies of our record ever, but we didn't realize that was a disappointment. And then we put out a song called Long Day. We made a big video. It was on MTV, but it wasn't responding. Like, it was just tanking. And so we were just about to be let go. And there was a program director, because this was a time when, like, if you were a program director of a radio station, you could just play songs you liked. Yep. Like you were kind of dictating what was going to be on your station, as opposed to now where there's like a computer algorithm that kind of tells you what you're supposed to be playing. And all these companies own, like one company owns like 1,700 stations or something. So Dave Rossi liked the song Push. And so on his radio station in Birmingham, Alabama, he put it into heavy rotation immediately. And every night we were playing little clubs to nobody. And then we pulled into Birmingham that night at this place called 5 Points Music Hall. And there was a line around the block. And then Atlantic said, there's something happening here with Push. They released Push and it started immediately to respond. And then everything kind of went from that point on there. So it was like this, it was a convergence of a bunch of happenstances, right? That had to happen in session. And even sometimes like the things that happened that we thought were like big blows to us and setbacks turned out to be, put a lot of wind in the sail. Yeah. If we had been on Lava, maybe it wouldn't have been as good as being on Atlantic Records. If our first band, when that band broke up, there was a lot of contention. There's a lot of litigious just stuff that was going on. And so to save myself from further problems, instead of, all the songs that I had written my whole life leading up to that moment, I took 6 months before the first MatchBox record and wrote an entire record. Everything except for 3 a.m. was brand new. So that was like my sophomore record, but it was such a better record than what I'd done before. So that setback also turned out to be something good. Yeah. So along the way, it was all these things that happened. And I didn't realize that they were all, like paving the way for me to have more success.
That's incredible. My friend often says that a setback is often a setup, right?
Yeah, a lot of times and it's hard to see those things in the moment.
It is.
Because, and I think it's the problem with planning. Like everybody has a plan, everybody has a way that they think things should go, and it involves step 1, 2, 3, 4, and step 3 doesn't go the way you thought. It's just like, it's all over now, and you don't realize it's not your plan. You're just hold on and just go for the ride and see where it takes you.
That's awesome. I love the convergence. It was a mix for you of hard work, hustle, right place, right time, believing in yourself. Did you guys ever feel like maybe this is just not for us? Maybe it's not meant to be? Or did you always feel
a lot of times? Yeah. I mean, I think part of the thing was like, and I just, my son, like I said, just graduated from Berklee College of Music. He went out to LA with his band, and I probably gave him the best advice, but the worst parenting advice, which was I told him not to have a backup plan. I was like, I want you to, if you want to do this, you have to go in all in. Like you have to you can't have half of your attention somewhere else, hedging your bets. And so like I did every job possible that couldn't become a career, right? Like I did everything in construction and everything at restaurant jobs, everything, driving, delivery jobs, like anything that I could do that if I had to quit a job on Friday, I could get a new one on Monday. If I had to have a gig, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
So, and anything that also didn't take away my attention. Like I knew that this is what I wanted to do. Like I don't even know if I have a good work ethic. I just know that I have a good work ethic when it comes to doing this. I'll work 16-hour days. I'm gone nonstop because it's just something I love so much.
Yeah. So that advice that you gave to your son, Mason, right? Is that he's 25?
Mason, yeah.
25 years old. Is that the same advice you'd give to somebody looking for their big break? Like just don't have a backup plan?
I mean, yeah, I think you kind of have to. In my opinion, this is not something, it's a life that you're kind of into, you know what I mean? And so it's not something that you can kind of be half in and half out of. I mean, I'd say obviously you can. There's a lot of people that just enjoy music.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that play music in their off time. There's a lot of people but if you have that obsession and you really want to be a part of creating as for your job. Like I get asked all the time, what would I be doing if I didn't do this? And my answer is always just, I would be doing this for less people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have to do this. You're not doing it for the audience. You're doing it because it's like what you were created, who you were created to be, right? This musical.
Yeah, like these songs sit inside of my head. They take up space, like, in my head, and I have to get them out.
Yep.
And then also there's other things that are going on in my life that for some reason I can't figure out a way to explain something to you. But if I pair it with a melody and I put it into a song, it explains it better than I ever could. And the same reason why people love music, because your favorite song might say something to you about how you're feeling better than you can express yourself.
Totally. I completely get that. I have to ask you, I heard that you opened up for a band called Jars of Clay. I was a huge fan. Is that's legit? You really did?
First, when we started out, we never really opened, but for the first tour, we were like the first year, we were opening for a band called Jars of Clay, which, they had that really big hit at the time.
Uh-huh.
And then a band called the Guffs. We opened for the Lemonheads.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And then we did one show opening for the Rolling Stones.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Talked about wanting to be a good role model for your son, Mason, who recently turned 25, and you posted about him on Instagram. And there are a lot of comments. People were like, I didn't even know you had a kid. And I know both you and Muddy are very private, and Mason's from a previous relationship. Tell me some of the joys and challenges of being a dad, especially you have a 25-year-old, which is crazy because you're only 32, Rob. So I don't understand the math. I mean,
thank you. And thank you for that. I know it was an anomaly. Nobody talked about. Yeah, it's weird too, because even, other people in their 50s, like people my age, I guess they got started a little later. And so like everybody I know has like, maybe a 10-year-old, I mean, and I wasn't that young. I was 27.
Right.
Which isn't, ridiculous, especially if you're from the South. That's
I live
old.
in the South now. You have like 3 kids by now.
Yeah, I know. When I came back home at 18, they're like, "You're not married yet." But it was there was a lot there because I was gone a lot for my job, even more than I am now, because at that time you have less control over everything. You're just kind of riding it out. And I was a weekend dad, so I didn't have him all the time. He was at one point he lived all the way on the other side of the country, and that was a nightmare. But then when he was like 7, he moved to Boston, and so then he was only 3 hours away from me. And so then I got to see him all the time. Like if I was home, I'd every weekend. I was a weekend dad. I was fun dad. Then you don't want to try and overcompensate. You still want to be a dad, and and not just I'll give you everything you want because I don't see you enough.
Yeah.
And so like I struggled. The best thing was like I struggled of all the times that I didn't get to see him and everything that I missed. And I was talking to him just on this tour. He was out for like a week or two on the tour, and he was just like, "Dad, I don't remember any of that." He's just I just remember like you've always been kind and you've always been supportive. He's like, and I just remember you always being there anytime I needed you. And I was just like, oh, thank God.
I mean, it's so crazy too. Like what we put out there too, our kids will pick up. Like we don't, like, we feel all of this guilt about not being there for every single moment. And then you have to make up for it with gifts and lavish them. But like, we're not going to harm our kids if we have passions. You know what I mean? If we're on the road for work too. But
I mean, I think if anything, my son has seen what this means to me, and that's why he's put his whole life into it. And I wouldn't say suspect, but I was curious about how it was going to go and how serious he was going to take it. And going to Berkeley was a big step, but it's also a huge expense if it's not something that he wants to do. And watching him through those 4 years just really blossom. He spends all of his time rehearsing, all of his time just building and getting better and stronger and writing. And so, I feel like this is something that I think he could be really, really good at.
Have you given him some possible names for a band like Tabitha's Secret or Bondage? Say, son, I've got a long list.
I've given him lots of advice, and he's ignored all of it, and that shows that he knows exactly what he's doing.
Except for the advice you gave him about not having a backup plan. He's like, I will listen to that. So
yeah, I know that was an easy one for him to take.
I know, seriously.
I figured that without a backup plan, the worst case scenario is that I'm going to have a 30-year-old son living on my couch for a little bit. And that's a small price to pay for like helping him find his dreams.
He can join the dogs. Okay, we're gonna go through.
Actually, it's funny. So I'm going back out with my solo band next year. I'm putting together a new solo record, and I have a few like corporate gigs and one-offs and charity gigs and stuff coming up. Yep. Mason is actually going to be the guitar player in my band.
Stop it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What a proud moment. Will this be like really the first time the two of you have shared a stage together?
No, whenever he's out with me, he always gets up and plays, but it's usually a song or two.
Right.
And his band opened up for the Hollywood, when we just did the Hollywood Bowl, his band opened. Okay. But this will be like the first time, that he's been in the band.
Yep. That's so awesome. That'll be a really great moment for the two of you. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Rob Thomas. And you can go watch the full interview on YouTube if you want, or listen to the entire interview on any podcast platform. And we're going to be back next week too, John,
Paula,
as school's out for parents.
Paula, I think your cool factor definitely went up after that episode. Anytime you get to hang out with a rock star, some of that's going to wear off on you. And in fact, you love your good rock and roll t-shirts, and you wear a lot of those. So.
But you're the one with the real musical talent.
That is true.
I shouldn't say talent, because you don't really have a lot of musical talent, but you have great musical taste.
I've got an ear for good music, and I'm kind of the playlist guy in our family. And me and my daughter, we have that connection because I think she got that love of music. And I learned some of the new bands she's listening to, and she listens to some of the more classic bands that I introduce her to.
All right, John, school's out for parents, and everybody listening or watching School's Out for Summer. We're going to be back next week with another favorite moment from seasons 1 and 2. Have a good week. We'll see you next week, everyone.
See you, everybody.
I know you guys thought you were done with me, but not quite yet. I have one more thing to tell you about. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe to the show. I don't want you to miss a single beat or a single conversation. And remember, my DMs are always open. Tell me what you want to talk about.